That's right. Time for another edition of Ranking the Albums. And who am I going to bring in with me to guest star today? None other than Mr. Kiebzak. Welcome,
How's it
Chris.
going? How's it going? What's going on?
We got
Nice to be
another,
back.
yeah, another hair band, technically band here to rank here. And, small catalog. These guys haven't made a studio album since 2003. Hard to believe.
Yeah.
But they've been touring nonstop since then, so that's a good thing. And so right now we're just going to rank the six albums. And if you want to start off by giving us your quick rundown on how you got into the band.
Well, I heard All She Wrote when I was a kid. I believe it was something on VH1. And yeah, I just started going into information about it. And then by that time I had met you and you were a really big Firehouse fan. And so I sort of got into the whole catalog through that. And then I was able to see him. I don't know how many times did we see him together? Three or four times, something like that. Um, so yeah, they always I always liked um their no frills attitude. The only thing I knew before Joe really brought me into that world, before you really brought me into that world was the first record and the second record, like Hold Your Fire and stuff. But it was I loved the album, and then by the time we went to see them together, and they played songs off of what tour was that? The one in Infinity must have been three.
Yeah, it must have been the Primetime tour because
It
that was when
was
they came,
prime. It was prime
2003.
time because
Yeah,
I remember they played that song Crash,
and
and I
Door to
think
Door, Michael Foster on
yes,
on
exactly.
vocals. Yep.
Michael Foster song, which is a good song. Yeah, but so I sort of got into the whole catalog at that point. So always loved them. Obviously, I always thought they were a little underrated, and much like Mr. Big and the rest of the bands that came out post the initial hair band
Mhm.
blow up. Um, I feel like they sort of got put to the back burner in the heavy category, but they have some heavy songs throughout their whole catalog. And re-listening to this catalog, it proves that they absolutely have some bangers in there that people just overlook. And for a band of that stature that only had a couple hits, I feel they released real consistent stuff throughout their career. So it's going to be fun to rank them and talk about them with you. Now, how did you get into Firehouse?
It was supposed to be Warrant, Firehouse, and Trickster at the old Darien Lake. And I just remember hearing on the radio, "Don't Treat Me Bad," and that's the song that got us all. My brothers were big into it too. So we all went to the show, and then day of the show, we get there and Firehouse canceled. I
Wow.
guess there was a problem with CJ's voice or something weird. They had to cancel, so we got screwed big time. So all they had was Trickster and Warrant. So what happened? Warrant played longer to kind of make up for that situation because they were on tour doing the whole. There was actually a video out on MTV of that whole tour with all three bands. And unfortunately, with that show being canceled here, we never got to see Firehouse. They never made it up or anything. But they came back the next. Well, yeah, next year they came back and they were on the Poison tour with the damn Yankees, and that's when I got to see them for the first time the year later. So at the new amphitheater. They were the first band on the new amphitheater to take the stage, Firehouse at
Yeah.
the new Darien Lake.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, because that place is still going strong.
I wouldn't say strong, but it's going. All
Yeah, I
right, let's
know.
let's get into the album rankings here. No hesitating now. No monkey business.
Yeah.
Let's go. What's your number six?
All right. All right. So my number six is actually the sixth album they released, Prime Time. I actually thought this one was going to be a little higher based on when I first really dove into it, which probably, like you said, right around either that year or the year after when it came out, because we went to that show. Always loved the song Crash. I like I'm the One, I think is really good. It reminds me of like a like a newer version of Don't Walk Away. I like that sleazy, bluesy kind of vibe. I thought that's a great song. Other than that, not so much like hard rock thrills for me. It's more of like almost like a bluesy based record. I do like the songs, but as far as in their catalog, I would definitely put that as the sixth record. Prime Time by FireHouse from 2003. That's my number six.
Okay. All right, and my number 6 is the exact same album. Yeah, for
Mm,
some reason, this album just kinda loses me compared to the other Firehouse albums now. This is, this album never charted. It was released on Spitfire, 2003, like you said. I think for me, I mean, as much as I love Bill Leverty, he's got some great solo material, and he does some singing on those, and it's pretty good. I don't really need to hear Bill Leverty sing in Firehouse. I'm sorry. I love Bill Leverty, great guy, great guitarist. I do not need to hear him sing on this album. I would have loved it if CJ sang at least, door to door. Michael Foster did do a really good job on that. I got no issue with that song. But the two that Bill sing, yeah, Bill, stick to the guitar, buddy. You're a great guy. I love you, but just not my cup of tea on these songs that you got on this album here. I think Let Go, the album closer, is definitely a standout track. And Perfect Lie's all right. Holding On, that's the one of the two that Bill sing. It's okay, but it's just really, and obviously Crash is like the highlight of the album. That's the
for
song
sure.
that they were always playing, even well after the album was released. Years later, they still would stick that in the set a lot. Yeah, there you have it. Prime Time, just not up to speed as far as the rest of the catalog. Unfortunately.
Gotcha. I feel the same exact way. Just sort of not up to speed with yeah, with the rest of their catalog. Definitely, for sure.
All right.
So number five is the 1995 released Three, which is their third record. Just didn't really get into it too much when I first heard it, and after listening to it now, again, just really not. It was between this and Prime Time for me. And I realized I like this one a little bit better. A couple good songs. Love is a Dangerous Things, great song. First song on a Firehouse record is always one of the better songs on the record. I like the song Get a Life. And actually, they did chart two singles for this record. I Live My Life for You was number 26, and Here for You was number 108 for US charting. So I thought that was a little weird. Those songs are okay, I guess. But yeah, just not a huge fan of the record. I feel like maybe it would have did them well if at that point in their career they would have tried to push more into the grunge type of thing like they sort of did with the two albums that followed, just a little bit. Instead, they sort of stuck with the glam metal thing, and I don't feel it went too well here for them. So, yeah, that's my number five.
All right, so I got a different number 5 for me. For mine, it's going to be O2,
Oh, okay.
from 2000, also on Spitfire Records.
Yeah.
Um, didn't chart either. Could kind of see why, unfortunately. Yeah, this album, I think the highlights would be "Don't Fade on Me," a weird song. I'd rather be making love. "Call of the Night" was probably the heaviest song on the album. "What You Can Do" was all right, but the rest of it, unfortunately, I could just, how they usually say the old term, take it or leave it. I'm just going to leave it. Um, but it is definitely better than Prime Time by a little bit. Um, but unfortunately for me, it's the second weakest album that they've recorded. But I would say, other than these two, my final four selections are all solid albums. So I do really like the remaining four albums that I'm choosing from. It's just that these two just didn't have enough, just not quite enough pizzazz to them to make me really like them that much. So that's where I stand with those ones.
Hmm. Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, I sort of feel the same way of what you just said. I feel like my going up now for my top four on, I really love those records, and it's not that my fifth and sixth choices are bad records, because honestly, for a band that only put out six records and is a glam band like that, I think they did very, very well with their catalog. But, the first 4 for me are definitely albums I really, really, really love. So, for my number 4, I have Category 5 from 1998. Now for these, for 4 and 3, I was actually very, surprised at how much I l fell in love with these records again. So I took a couple of small notes just to sort of show why. And the first thing I said is this a concept record about rain? Every single fucking song on there is about rain or weather. So I thought that was sort of interesting. But great production. The album has very heavy tones. I love the way that record's produced. Can't Stop the Rain, I think, is a great opening track. It's catchy, good structured. Firehouse may be the only glam band to pull off a very, very good grunge attempt with this song, and I believe that. I thought that song fit right up there with Rock Radio from 1998. Um, I think Acid Rain's a great song. I said Acid Rain isn't a bad song if you like the Beatles or Cheap Trick, but putting it after the ballsy opening track is for sure a momentum killer. But yeah, the great musicianship on that record too. I think Bill Leverty's guitar playing shines. I think some of the standout tracks, Can't Stop the Rain, Acid Rain, If It Changes, Have Mercy, and Life Goes On. There's a couple I don't like, Bringing Me Down and Get Ready being the main two. But yeah, I thought that record really ballsy compared to what I remembered it as, and missing a little something, I think. That's why it's number 4 for me, but still a lot better than I remember it being. Very versatile and all over the board.
All right, so my number 4 is actually going to be number 3.
Yep.
All right, so got to give 3 a little bit of props only because of the fact it turns out to be the last charting album in the band's career to date, since they haven't made one since 2003. Everything after this album failed to chart. It reached number 66, which got to remember that was right in the middle of the grunge era. So for them to still make a top 100 album, man, it's actually pretty impressive. And then to top that off, like you mentioned, they had two singles. They had a top 40 hit. No hair bands had any top 40 hits after 1993 with the with the way the Firehouse did here. This song was played everywhere. But I think like you had mentioned, this the way they went about making this album, I wouldn't actually call it glam or anything like that. They kind of went more pop is what it was,
I get that.
which is probably why they made it on the charts so high. Because I Live My Life for You is almost like Love of a Lifetime Part Two,
Yes.
and they kind of but that's what they kind of did. And when I look into your eyes, they kind of molded it as the ballad for the album. But that song at the time, people really got into it, and it was played on like Kiss 98.5 and all the pop stations, which at that point there was no way they were going to play them on the Edge or anywhere else. So had to kind of adapt the album to be able to be played on some radio somewhere, and that's exactly what they did.
Right.
So I mean, on this album, I would say the first two songs they're okay. They start the album off okay. Love is a Dangerous Thing. What's Wrong? Trying to Make a Living's good. Here for You. But the rest of the songs, until you get to the closer, I Live My Life for You, they're just pedestrian. Nothing really standing out there. Unlike the earlier catalog. This definitely this album, and as you can see, for me, this is the my number 4. So I got 3 albums ranked higher than it, including one that you didn't have higher than. So that shows you how much I liked the next album that's going to be on my ranking compared to even 3, which 3 albums, 3 charted albums for their first career.
Right.
But you know, and it unfortunately it never went anywhere. Even though it charted okay, it never went gold or anything like that. So basically, that single really saved them and helped them prolong things,
Yeah.
by having that top 40 hit. And if memory serves me right, they actually came to Buffalo on that tour at the old pier for
Oh,
Kiss
okay.
98's Kiss the Summer Hello. So that shows you right then and there that they really did gear themselves toward pop because the pop radio station was the ones that brought them to town.
Right. Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. I mean, they still have the glam vibe a little bit, but yeah, I guess the poppiness of what glam is, there's a lot of pop in there, right? So yeah, I
Yeah,
guess that's what I meant is that there's sort of like this overall glammy, poppy vibe that's isn't where a lot of those bands went for at the time into the
right.
grunge movement, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, so that's my number 4. And what do
Yep.
you got? We got the top 3 coming up now.
All right. Number three, I have O2 from 2000.
Mhm.
I know you already, what did you have this at? Five?
5, yeah.
Okay. I think the songs are much better on this one than Category 5, but the production on O2 is sort of what always scared me away from it. But upon listen, I mean, I think the album ranges from good songs to really, really great songs. Soft production, which takes away from it a little bit. But I like the first song Jumpin' is amazing. It reminds me of Ballroom Blitz. That's one thing I did notice about this record is they take a lot from other songs, whether they meant to do it or not. Like
Mhm.
there's like five songs and you're like, oh, that sounds like the riff in this. So you mentioned the song I'd Rather Be Making Love. I actually really like that song, but the verse is a complete ripoff of Whiskey in a Jar. So like I've noticed like all these little like
Mhm.
things that you can tell they were trying to go to their influences a little bit almost, and I like that. I thought the songs are really strong. I think Take It Off's a good song. CJ's vocals, he has this really cool vocal cadence on the first record that I think isn't really duplicated much in the rest of the catalog except for that song. I think The Dark is a really weird song. It's almost like a rap song. Are you familiar with that song, The Dark?
Mhm.
I like it. I think it actually works better than it should. So yeah, for some reason, I really fell in love with this record. After not listening to it in years, but I think the songs are amazing. I just wish the production was a little better, but definitely, I think worthy of a top three spot for me.
All right, so my number 3, we're gonna go down to category 5. This album is kind of, in my estimation, the unheralded gem of the album because, you got the first 2 albums, which are just classics, and this is the next best thing in my catalog ranking here. Category 5 came out in 1998, and then it turns out to be Perry Richardson's last album with the band. And I remember they came over to, they played the old, the good old in Niagara Falls there.
Oh, the Evening Star.
Yep, the Evening Star. They
Yeah,
played over there for that tour, and man, there was hardly anybody there. What a shame, because it was
yeah.
a great show, great show. But they gave it their all, played a great show,
Well,
played it through.
that was right before the resurgence in '99 with the Poison and Rat thing and all that.
Hmm.
Right, so that's where that came from probably, huh? So you that was like the last year where they probably had crowds like that.
Yeah, so for me, the highlights on the album are the ballad "Dream." I just love that song. I remember them playing that one live at that show, phenomenal. And if you got, there's a live album that came from this tour as well, Firehouse, Bring 'Em Back Alive. Bringing Me Down, great song. I just love that song. That's one of the standouts. I wish they would still play it nowadays. They don't really bring that one back much. Acid Rain, another good song. The Nights Were Young. Talk about a nostalgic song that takes you back to a moment in time. Definitely a great song. Um, the Day, the Week, and the Weather, another standout track from the album. But I think it's a little too long for me, though. I would think the album would have been a little bit served better if they cut off 2 or 3 songs. I think it would have had it would have been a more solid album. When you add more filler to an album, sometimes it kind of weighs it down or takes away from the album as a whole. And that's
Right.
what it kind of does on this album. I think more people would like this album if it was just a few tracks less, because then the songs that are really good would stand out even more, and you would play it all the way through, or a better chance of playing it all the way through without skipping tracks, things like that. So, the CD age, they had to put on, a certain number of songs. They kind of learned their lesson. The last 2 albums they released after that, they only put 10 songs on. So that's a much better way to go about it. back in the 70s, man, you had so many bands that only put on like 8, 9, or 10 at the very most on an album. And then in the 80s, a lot of bands went 10. And then as the CD age came into play in the very, very early 90s, that's when you started seeing everybody jamming in as much songs as they can. And that kind of brings down a lot of albums sometimes just because they're putting on extra filler that weighs down the album. So, but
Right.
yeah, category five, definitely a highlight for me with the band. I really like this album, and that's why it's number three. So let's see if we agree on our top two.
Yeah, probably. Let's see. So number two, I have 1992's Hold Your Fire. Um, Again, I mean, good follow-up. I don't think the songs are as strong as the debut, but there are some real standouts here. Life in the Real World, I think, is phenomenal. Hold Your Fire, obviously. Reach for the Sky, obviously, pretty big song from that record. And Mama Didn't Raise No Fool may be my favorite on the record. Um, great, great talented, typical Firehouse at that point where the songs are rocking, and then obviously, Love of a Lifetime, or I'm sorry, When I Look in Your Eyes, um, just I'm not a ballad guy, but that's a just a great, nice song that I still like. Sometimes feel the tears building up when you listen to it. It's a really good, like good feel good ballad for me. But yeah, Hold Your Fire, definitely a very, very solid return after the debut. But yeah, I wish, there's a couple songs I'm not a huge fan of there. I really don't like The Meaning of Love, and I think Talk of the Town, I'm not a huge fan of either. But yeah, definitely a good album that is consistent pretty much from start to finish. So that's my number two. So their second release.
All right, very good. My number two is the exact same album, so we agree on that one.
Yeah, figured as
Um,
much.
yeah. So the weird thing was, I think they kind of didn't release the proper singles. I don't know if that was it had to have been the record label that did that. Reach for the Sky was a little too heavy to be released as the first single for the album. And I think that's where they made a mistake because it only reached number 83. So that didn't get the album off to a good start as far as album sales are concerned. They
Right.
should have released, even though it's a ballad, they could have done When I Look Into Your Eyes as the first song. Actually, Hold Your Fire would have been probably a
I was
better
gonna say,
a
Hold Your
better
Fire
single.
is a little
The
bit
title
less
track.
heavy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not
That
as
may have been
heavy,
the right
but
way to
still a
go.
great song, and you can hear the way CJ sings that voice on that album that song is just great.
Yeah.
They opened up with that song on that tour, so that shows you how much they really liked it. They opened with it.
I do like Reach for the Sky a lot, but you
Oh, I
might be
like
right.
it, but it was just not the right choice. It only hit number 83, and that's why the album did not do as good as the first album. And in reality, it should have done about the same because the songs are almost like it's almost like pretty. His first album is definitely a little bit better, but still, it's not a bad. It's a very close follow up
Yes,
to
I
the
agree.
first album. You know what I mean?
You
So
know, it's weird. The third single released was Sleeping with You.
yeah, and I love that song. That's actually
Yeah,
a
it's a good
great
song.
song. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard them sing that one yet live. I've got to talk to Mr. Levity about that one, but that's a great song.
You know, it didn't look like the album got too many good professional reviews at the time, though. From when I was researching it, and from what's on Wiki and stuff, it didn't look like the album was really critically talked about in a good way. No, did you feel that way when it
No
came out?
idea. No idea. All I know is I bought it the day it came out, and I remember we were cranking it up, and everybody that I was hanging around with at the time loved it. They all went out and bought it at the same time. So, great album. Definitely one of the best for the band. Um, you got, Rock You Tonight was that's one of the great songs. You're Too Bad is good. Get in Touch is cool. The Meaning of Love, you didn't really like that one, I think you said, but Hold the Dream, the album ends on a cool note with that song. That's a great way to end this album.
Yeah,
Um,
that's definitely a good one too that I didn't mention, but I actually do like that song, "Hold the Dream."
I just like this, there's not really too much in dead weight on this album because it's got the same number of tracks as the first album. So maybe Life in the Real World, and not too big of a fan of Mama Didn't Raise No Fool. But other than that, the rest of the album, thumbs up for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Number one,
All right. So my number
drum
one
roll.
is the debut 1990s Firehouse. Um, I don't think there's one track I've ever skipped through a full listen of this record. Obviously, I have certain songs and playlists and stuff, but I every single song from Rock on the Radio all the way down to Helpless, I think is just amazing. Really good, solid 45 minutes of pure rock, couple slower ones, but again, great songs. My favorites on the album are Shake and Tumble, All She Wrote, Don't Walk Away and Helpless. Those two songs, Don't Walk Away and Helpless, I think are the underrated champions of all hair metal from the 90s on. I think those songs are phenomenal and probably two of the best in the hair metal, my favorite hair metal catalog. Love those records or love those songs. Don't Treat Me Bad, I think is good for what it is. Um, Ought to Be a Law, Lovers Lie. The whole record just front to back is incredible. I love Bill Leverty's playing. I love the heaviness. I love even the ballads. Like yeah, as everyone knows, I'm not a huge ballad fan, but Love of a Lifetime's great. And then who could forget Overnight Sensation? I think we've seen him open up with that once or twice, but Overnight Sensation, great opening song. And yeah, love the first album. I don't think they were ever going to be able to really do one better than that. Like we said, this, Hold Your Fire was definitely a really, really good try and definitely right underneath it and not far from it. But this album's a whole new caliber in my opinion. And yeah, I love this album. Definitely probably in my top 10 to 15 favorite albums of all time, at least in the glam and hair metal category, that's for sure.
All right. Now that's also going to be my number one. There's no doubt about that. The first Firehouse is definitely the best Firehouse. And what could be said about Overnight Sensation? Probably the best song they ever recorded.
Yeah.
Classic tune. Probably seen them open with up with it about 10 times. Just a great song. It's always one that I recommend people should see. CJ's voice on it's just killer. Um, you mentioned some of the ones that stood out for you, the usual. I can tell you one song I'm not a big fan on is Rock on the Radio. I'm not
Oh,
really
okay.
into that song too much. I never really got into that one, especially when I heard him open with it before. I almost choked to death. No, it's just not a fan of that song, but
I do think it's a very bad choice for an opening track for sure. Out of all
yeah.
the songs they have there,
hmm
that was probably a bad decision to open with the record with that, but
But from there you got All She Wrote, which is the same usually the second song they usually play in the set all the time. They've pretty much kept that standard throughout their career, whatever they open up with, and then they go right into All She Wrote. It's just classic. I think they never shy away from it because it just does so well going into that song second. And
right.
then Shake and Tumble, another gem. Um, they usually end the show with Don't Treat Me Bad. Lover's Lane's another one that they usually play a lot live. Yeah, I mean, what else could be said about this album? Just almost from top to bottom, every song is definitely it keeps your attention and you play this album all the way through. So yeah, definitely great album, and that was the debut, and there's nothing better than it in my estimation.
And they may be one of the only bands that this debut album, I've seen them maybe 4 or 5 times, and they constantly are changing these songs around. I've seen every song on this album at least twice. You know what I mean? Like they constantly, if they're not playing Helpless, they'll play Overnight Sensation. And if they're not playing, Don't Walk Away, they'll play Lover's Lane. But they include, I mean, most of their set is the first record at this
Yeah.
point, isn't it?
Ought to Be a Law was one I never got to see until like maybe about 10 years ago finally they played it and that went over really well.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's great record.
All right, so there we
Yeah,
have it.
that's
There's
it.
our Firehouse ranking. Quick rundown on the six albums once again. Was a great listen going back listening to these. It's just a shame that these guys haven't made another album since. And I remember I asked Bill about it, and then, doesn't sound like they're gonna ever make another album. I don't know. It's just the way, they got their solo stuff Bill always works on. And then it's for whatever reason, maybe they'll I know he talked about possibly doing singles here and there, and then when they get enough singles, maybe making an album. I know some Tesla also did the same thing by mentioning that. But I think, the albums nowadays, I think a lot of bands I just tend to shy away from it because it's so expensive to do, and it ties up a lot of their touring activity. If you take a couple months out to write an album and record it, it takes away from you being out on the road touring, and a lot of
Oh,
these
definitely.
bands, they make their living off touring, so they really don't have time to be making an album really, unless they did it in a respect where they'll do a couple songs at a time and just kind of let them all get them bring them all together and make an album maybe down the road. But for now, this is what we got, the 6 albums, and we'll keep our fingers crossed, that maybe they will make another one down the road. You
Yeah, you
never
never
know.
know. Hopefully they do.
All right. Well, leave some comments for us. Let us know what you think about this catalog, what you like, what you don't like, what your favorite songs are off each album, stuff like that. We'd love to hear it.
Yep.
And we'll be back with some more rankings for the over the next little while. We got some big ones coming up. We won't mention names, but let me tell you, you're going to be in for a shock when you see the next band we're going to be doing.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone.